Alright, so I wanted to talk about these two stories that have absolutely nothing to do with each other, but quite frankly, it's more convenient for me to put it into one video instead of two, so that's what I'm doing. Alright, so first of all, let's talk about Supergirl. Millie Alcock has officially been cast. James Gunn confirmed it on Threads. And I honestly think that this is really great casting. Millie Alcock, if you don't know, she was in House of the Dragon, and I thought she was absolutely fantastic in that show. Like, so much so that in that show, there's a time jump where her character becomes an adult. And it took me a couple episodes, genuinely, to, like, get used to the new actress. Because I was like, I really like Millie. I wanted to see Millie continue, but she's great. And judging by what this Supergirl movie is supposedly going to be, I think that especially so makes her qualified, because James Gunn has said that this movie is going to be somewhat of an adaptation of Supergirl, Woman of Tomorrow. And I admittedly haven't read this run of comics, but from everything that I've heard, it's actually a pretty like mature take on the character. And Supergirl is supposed to have a bit of an edge to her. She's jaded by life, of course, because, you know, if you don't know Supergirl, her origin story is that she was, like, sent away as a teenager from Krypton. And again, I'm not too familiar with the character, but she somehow, like, got into some kind of, like, cryostasis, and she, like, stayed a teenager. And by the time she got to Earth, Clark grew up and he was Superman. And so it was a weird situation where she left Krypton as a teenager in order to protect Clark. But by the time she got to Earth, Clark was already Superman. So she not only saw her planet explode, and her like goal in life, right? The reason why she had to see her planet explode is irrelevant now. And so just right off the bat, me just hearing that makes me a lot more interested in the character, because my only real relationship with Supergirl comes from the CW show, and that show was not very good. But one of the core reasons why that show just didn't quite work was just because at the end of the day, Supergirl just kind of felt like a female version of Superman. She was this like awkward character working at a newspaper. Her crush was Jimmy Olsen. Who was an aspiring reporter. They even had like a Jimmy Olsen knockoff character who was like this dorky guy. Like a lot of the villains were literally just Superman villains. Were like in the first season they were fighting other Kryptonians that were basically just Zod. Like they wanted to do the same thing that Zod did. Then I remember in like some of the later seasons there was literally like, hey, it's Lex Luthor's sister. It's like, it was just an ultimate just lack of creativity, I felt like, from that show. On top of it just not being executed very well. Although, to be fair, Melissa Benoist I thought was actually quite good in the show. In any case, the most important thing to do if you're going to bring in a Supergirl is you have to differentiate her from Clark. And this seems like a brilliant take on the character. And we've seen in House of the Dragon that Millie Alcock has that dog in her. Like, she can definitely play like a jaded Supergirl that hates life, hashtag relatable, and that's depressed and whatnot. Like, she can play that character well. So the one weird part about this is that we don't know who's going to be directing this movie yet. And here's the thing. They most likely already have their director for the movie. We just don't know about it. So I would assume that the director was a part of the casting process, but that is the one thing that gives me pause, where it's like, it's possible that you don't have your director yet, and it would be weird to cast Supergirl without that director. Now, the other thing is that we also do know that Supergirl is supposed to appear in a movie before Supergirl Woman of Tomorrow. We don't know for a fact if it's going to be Superman Legacy. It could be some other movie, although it probably will be Superman Legacy. So if she's being cast in a movie before Supergirl Woman of Tomorrow, then, I mean, it's fair to cast her without the director. But still, you'd think you'd want a director on board to have them involved in the casting process. But either way, I'm actually, like, really interested in Supergirl Woman of Tomorrow, and I want to get around to reading that run of comics, because apparently I've heard it's, like, amazing. So we'll see. Let me know what you think in the comments down below. All right, now let's talk about Avatar: The Last Airbender. So the actors for Sokka and Katara have come out and mentioned that they are going to be adjusting Sokka's sexism for the series. So let's read their interview with Entertainment Weekly, or at least part of it. I wanted to make sure that Sokka is funny, he says. Owsley notes there's more weight with realism in every way. Some things that worked in the more zany animated kids show hit differently in live action. Kiawentio, who Owsley is Sokka and Kiawentio is the Katara actress. Owsley is the guy that plays Sokka. Kiawentio is the actor that plays Katara, just so you know. Kiawentio mentions one of them. I feel like we also took out the element of how sexist Sokka was. I feel like there were a lot of moments in the original show that were iffy. Owsley agrees with Kiawentio. Yeah, totally. There are things that were redirected just because it might play a little differently in live action. This is something that has been causing a bit of an uproar on social media, and here's one thing that I want to point out first. At the end of the day, we haven't seen the show. We don't know how all of this is going to play out. From the way they're talking, it does kind of sound like, yeah, it seems like they completely took out the sexism, because if we just go back to the quote here, the Katara actress says, I feel like we also took out the element of how sexist Sokka was. I do just want to point out that it is possible that they just took out some of the more animated, as I mentioned, some of the more animated parts of it, some of the more zany elements of sexism. It's possible it's still there, but it's just reined back a little bit so that it plays a little bit more realistically in live action. So I just want to point that out, that at the end of the day, we have not seen the show. Maybe it's as bad as it sounds. Maybe it's not as bad as it sounds. Maybe we'll watch and we'll be like, you know what, that was a smart choice. But I do just want to kind of talk about hypothetically, okay, let's say that they just flat out took it out, because, I will go back and I will say that the Katara actress does say, I feel like there were a lot of moments in the original show that were iffy. So, I mean, when she says that, it sounds like she's just straight up saying that some parts of the show maybe wouldn't work today in 2024. So I want to talk about why I think it would be insanely silly to just completely take out the sexism of the Sokka character. So let's get into it. First of all, if you go back and you watch Avatar: The Last Airbender again, bro, if this show came out today in our current retarded culture, war, battlefield that people engage in on the internet, do you have any idea how badly people would be screaming, woke, woke, oh, it's woke, the show is woke, oh, the writers are forcing their ideology onto us, blah. Like, Avatar: The Last Airbender is insanely woke. Like when we talk about Sokka's sexism, yes, he is sexist at first, but then he gets beat up by a bunch of women, which, like, forces him to, like, reconsider his opinion, right? If the scene where Sokka was getting beat up by Suki were released today, you'd have a bunch of people, like, in the comments section being like, women are inferior to men. Men are just biologically stronger. In real life, she would have gotten destroyed. That, without a question, would happen today, right? If you look at, like, the Toph character in general, the fact that she's like a little blind girl that is like one of the most powerful earthbenders, people definitely would have complained about that. And by the way, if you think I'm exaggerating, just look at Echo. There were people that were saying that, like, Echo was forced diversity or whatever because she's blind and disabled. There were people that were saying that legitimately. Okay? There's, like, the scene where, like, Katara directly yells at Sokka and calls him a sexist. Like, I'm just saying that there are a ton of moments in the original Avatar show that, by 2024 standards, would be called woke. I think y'all are silly geese, okay? I think 99% of the time, the shit that you guys complain about is not that deep. But this hypothetical response, and again, we have to see how it's handled. This hypothetical response by the writers of the Netflix show is like in a fourth dimension of culture war nonsense, where Sokka's arc in the original Avatar show, by 2024 standards, would unquestionably be considered woke. Unquestionably. And you're lying to yourself if you don't think there would be people complaining about it. for the writers of the Netflix show to not understand that, seemingly, that yes, Sokka is sexist, but his arc is him realizing that he was foolish to think that way, and for them to just look at the sexist actions and be like, that's not gonna fly in today's age, is just insane to me. Just the notion of that is incredibly bizarre to me, and kind of just lets me know that on multiple fronts, the culture war is so stupid, so pointless. Media literacy, I feel like, is at an all-time low. We're not even really analyzing art based off of like whether or not it's well made or not, but we're just analyzing it based off of if it checks off certain boxes, you know? And again, I mean that on both fronts. Whether it be the woke writers that are too dumb to realize that the thing that they think is not woke is actually insanely woke. But I also think that there's the other side that checks those exact same boxes, but whereas, you know, the woke people check them because they think it makes a story good, the other side checks the same boxes because they think it makes the story bad. We need to wait and see exactly how it's handled, but it is worrying because I think it would speak to the writers fundamentally misunderstanding a pretty obvious story arc in the show. And it makes me think that, well, how are you going to adapt everything else if you couldn't understand this basic element of Sokka? But we shall see. So let me know what you think about that in the comments down below. Let me know what you think about the Supergirl thing. And I will see you in the next video. Goodbye.